Hi there, welcome to Who Pays for Aging. I'm Matt Singleton and I'm from a company called Swiss Re, for those of you who don't know us. We're a reinsurer, which essentially means that we insure insurers. That's a promotional bit out of the way, and I should also make a health and safety announcement that homeschooling is going on downstairs, so if you hear any screams of anger, then that's quite normal during the current lockdown period, I'm sure. So what are we going to talk about in Who Pays for Aging? Well, as the title suggests, we're going to talk about how the older generation is currently funded, but also what might happen in the future, about the diversity of consumers, and as the generations reach an older age, what it will mean for future provision. And also, of course, as I'm from the insurance industry, I will be talking a little about what more insurers can do to help support people in later life. So let's start by talking about the usual first slide, which is all about how populations are changing. We all know that the older population, those over 65, is growing. It's growing at a rapid rate, about 1.3% every year in developed countries. But sometimes what we overlook is the fact that the traditional consumer base for insurers and indeed many other industries, those who are buying their first mortgage and taking out their life insurance product, or who might be starting to take their pension savings seriously for the first time, for example, that population is in decline. It's falling at about a rate of 0.3% every year. That's quite a decline. And what does that mean for us? Well, it means that just to stand still, we have to increase our penetration into that older generation, unless we do something more dramatic. Let's maybe discuss the aging wallet in a bit more detail. So what is the aging wallet? It demonstrates the opportunity for what industries can do more of. It says how nations are currently funded for their over 65 population. The main funders of the aging wallet are as follows. It's first of all society, which is made up of the family. The family provides informal care, and it still does to a very large degree, but also the state. Now, not surprisingly, the state provides things like old age pensions, it provides healthcare, it provides social care for many people in many countries. Also, we talk about individual savings. So savings, we mean private pension savings, also housing wealth, any other savings that may come into play. And finally, insurance. Now, the insurance industry provides a contribution to the aging wallet through things like pension annuities, private healthcare, very small social care markets that may exist around the world, and also some whole life insurance policies. Of the $11 trillion which is spent today, which equates to about 41,000 per annum per over 65, and we're talking US dollars in PPP, which is purchasing power parity. The insurance industry funds just 5%. That's a very small amount, as you can appreciate. The family provides about 10%, and as you can see, savings, private savings, about 25%, and 60 cents in every dollar is provided by the state, which clearly takes the most weight of the aging wallet today. When it comes to the picture in individual countries, we can see some vast differences. The differences aren't geographic, perhaps, but philosophical. So this is a picture across on the right-hand side, the developed world and China, the 41,000 per year that we were talking about per over 65, but also some of the pictures in 8 of the 13 markets that we've analysed for the Who Pays for Aging study. And on the left, you can see China and Poland. Now, they're smaller spending markets with a strong contribution from the family and a relatively high contribution from the savings, from the individual savings. Next to them, we see the United Kingdom and Australia, more of the mid-level spenders, but sort of public-private partnership type philosophy. Then Germany and Japan, again, similar expenditure to the UK and Australia, but the state is absolutely dominant in these models, as you can see. And then finally, we have these sort of giants, the Netherlands and the US, which has a similar level of state spending to the likes of Germany and Japan, but also this enormous private market, which adds to the picture as well. But demographics and affordability all demonstrate that society's contribution, both from the family and the state, will likely decline. There are numerous trends pointing to this. Apart from the demographic, there's the medical, the social, the economic. It's all driving a lower contribution from society and more emphasis on individual provision. We'll talk a bit more about what's happening with the family later, but let's make it absolutely clear: the family certainly not going away as a key provider to people in later life. And as the aging wallet changes, sure enough, the needs of consumers will evolve, and therefore we need to understand them better and ensure we can do more. To support our aging population, ensuring there's provision for the longer term is vital, but also to realise the opportunity that's in front of us, in front of insurers, in front of savings providers, in front of so many people who are looking to do more for our populations as they get older. At Swiss Re, we've spoken to 9,000 consumers across 9 markets. This wasn't just focused on insurance, not at least till the end anyway. We didn't really, looking back to that picture of the aging wallet and where insurance's position is, it's quite clear that insurance isn't top of mind in many markets, with a potential exception of the United States. So we didn't talk about insurance till the end. Instead, we talked about what people's aspirations are and what their fears are for later life, but also what they're doing to fund those aspirations and what plans they have in place financially and beyond, in terms of tackling some of those fears and what would happen if such a catastrophic event would take place. We also talked to families. We talked to 3 generations in the same room, and we'll get onto that more later, like I suggest. And finally, we took numerous conceptual insurance products which tackled these challenges which consumers told us about back to consumers, and then we tested them to see which ones worked well. A key outcome was some very robust consumer segmentation. These segments exist in all markets. There are differences between markets, and indeed there are differences within markets by age group, for example, but so much more. Here we can see a schematic of what exists. So if we look along the y-axis, the vertical axis, at the top we can see the planner, which is someone very much like me. I'm quite an enthusiast about my finances, obviously working in the industry. I'm probably not painting a very good picture of myself here, but I really take my pension savings, for example, very seriously. I check how well they're doing every year. I know pretty much how well my investments are doing at any one time, and I've got quite a clear plan for how I want to get to my later life. In fact, the only thing that can really derail my plans is something catastrophic, which we could probably say, or almost definitely say, is happening at the moment with the current situation with COVID-19. The fall in the markets is absolutely unforeseen and something I simply couldn't have planned for. When it comes to my vision for aging, that across the x-axis, I'm slightly more reserved, slightly less flamboyant perhaps than many people might be. I'm very much focused on carrying on doing more of the things I enjoy doing today. I'd like to even continue my gerontological studies up to doctorate level. I might want to go, I will want to go and watch a hell of a lot more cricket, and I want to spend more time in the garden should my health and well-being be good enough for that. On the other hand, we can see people on the right-hand side where they're a bit more adventurous. So my wife, for example, is the archetypal explorer. She wants to try new things. She wants to go and visit new countries, learn new languages, maybe go off and study something new. And as you've probably guessed by the differences between our aspirations, probably look for a new partner. But her attitude towards her provision, her planning, is slightly less engaged than mine, shall we say. She likes to just hand me her pension statements every year and say how am I doing, and I sort of say, well, you're doing very well. You've got a final salary scheme. You're gonna be far better off than me anyway, but providing everything stays in place. And as you can probably guess by that, the recipient is more has more the attitude towards their provision of that of the explorer, the more sort of reactive, less engaged approach, but has more my attitude towards their retirement, and what their vision is, that of continuing the things they enjoy today, grandchildren and gardening, we often say. The entrepreneur, the soaring eagle, and I'll go through the other birds in just a second, but the soaring eagle, the entrepreneur, is much more like me in their approach to planning, and much more like my wife in terms of their vision for their later life. So we see that the entrepreneur we represent by the eagle, the planner by the wise owl. Not sure I'd apply that to myself. The recipient, which I think is a bit harsh, which says they bury their head in the sand, they're an ostrich, and the explorer who is colourful, the colourful toucan. The four segment types sit more on a continuum, and we see about 75%, people who are 75% entrepreneur, people who are 25% explorer. And there are some rules of thumb that can be observed. Those with greater wealth tend to be in these top quadrants, the planners and the entrepreneurs, but that's not always the case. We shouldn't make the error that the recipients and the explorers are all in lower demographic socioeconomic groups. We see many successful recipients and explorers. We see many who've taken default options or followed advice, because we're all interlinked. We all have our lives are linked to other people. And when it comes to the x-axis, the vision, we see more younger people have a tendency towards the entrepreneur and the explorer, the right-hand side. They have more of a sort of flamboyant approach to their vision for later life. We don't think that many people go through a transition in their life. Some probably do, but we think this is actually probably more of a cohort effect. We think that the generation who's currently quite older were perhaps brought up in the days of rationing and things like this, so slightly more pragmatic and realistic about perhaps their future, and the younger generations that we see a slight tendency more towards these entrepreneur explorer type segments. We think that's probably due to the fact that they're brought up in a much more consumerist time. But see what you think. I mean, these things can be interpreted in many ways. And we also see differences between markets too. Here, for example, you can see the UK compared to Japan. So in the top two quadrants, the planner and the entrepreneurs, those eagles and owls, we see about 58% of people in the UK falling into these segments, but in Japan it's just 32% who are planners and entrepreneurs. So earlier I mentioned that Japan's wallet is dominated by the state, whereas the UK's is probably more of a public-private model. And this phenomenon seems to be quite consistent across all markets where we carried out the consumer research. And we can use this knowledge to understand some of the markets not included in the study when we talk about who pays for aging and the profile of the consumers there. So here we can see these studies linked on the various markets on a polynomial curve. For those of you interested in the world of statistics, the R squared on this is approaching 0.9. So it's pretty clear that there's a correlation that's taking place. On the y-axis is the proportion of wallet that is provided by private savings and insurance, so the individual private approach rather than the state or the family, the society side of things. And across the x-axis we can see the proportion of planners and entrepreneurs. So by adding the 5 markets in the Who Pays for Aging study that weren't included in our consumer research, we get an idea of what the segments look like in each of these markets. And as society's share declines, will we start to see models evolve where some of the countries start to move up the curve as more emphasis is placed on the individual to provide for later life? Just want to go through some of the other findings from the research. I mentioned earlier that we spoke to different generations of the same family in the same room at the same time. We wanted to see if the family represented a kind of decision-making unit. That was at least our ingoing thinking. But instead we discovered something quite different. We thought that they might all discuss things like finances in the future and things like this, but instead we got confusion and disarray. The differences in opinion on what's best for one another is really a taboo subject, one that's not really come up before we actually went in there and discussed it with them, and we probably ruined some familial relationships as a result of raising this taboo subject. And here's some examples of some things we found. This is one of my favorite quotes. It comes from Poland, but it could be from just about any market we study. The mother is essentially saying that if she gets too sick, she'll want to go into what she defines as an elderly home, and the daughter declares, "No way, imagine what the neighbours will say about me then." The idea that adult children don't want to provide care, informal care for their aged parents, is not something we found much evidence for, and indeed in many other studies, in gerontological studies, the same thing is often found. The family is alive and well. What we did find is the children willing to provide care, or at least saying they're willing to provide care, and the parents refusing it, saying they wanted the children to enjoy their own lives. This word burden was often used. I don't want to be a burden, which is not really a word I like, but it's one that the consumers, the elderly consumers, tended to see themselves as. We also found that in most, if not in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, there's an aversion to care homes, and people say they would prefer to, well, not need care in the first place, to stay fit and well, but if they ever do need care, to avoid a nursing home and actually age in their own home, age in place, as many people define it. Again, this was across all markets. This was common, with the slight exception possibly of Japan, where it wasn't seen as strongly. There seems to be more acceptance of moving into institutional care. And one wonders if the current situation with COVID-19, and obviously quite a high mortality rate, and often viewed as being a forgotten area of care homes, if we're going to start to see this desire become even stronger. I really want to say here that I mean, I've met and worked with many people who are involved in the care industry, who are involved with nursing homes, and I feel they get a really bad press. I've never met such a dedicated, caring bunch of people, and I often feel that the negative perception of nursing homes, I think in the UK we certainly see this being driven by the media, is rather an unfair one. And over time, we might see the family dynamic remaining strong, but a new form of reciprocity taking place. Again, this quote could come from any market, but it's a daughter and a son in front of the elderly parent, saying, the daughter saying, we want to get to a point where if either set of parents needed support, we would want to be able to pay for that support. And the son backing that up, saying, I would definitely help pay for them. Might we see something closer to this sort of reciprocity in the future, where it's more perhaps of a financial relationship? And could we, as an insurance industry, help people enable this? Could we help people who want to enable their parents to age well? Could we enable people who want to remain in their homes longer? Could we also, something that's not perhaps covered here, is there's a lot of people who are reaching later life and haven't got children, haven't got that family around them to provide either financial or physical hands-on informal care support. Could the insurance industry do more to support them? I mean, specific to the UK, which is obviously where this conference is taking place, once we get some more clear direction from the government, which we hope to get soon, obviously once the current issues are at least becoming lessened, as we hope they will soon, there could be a real opportunity here. And the final area I want to cover from the consumer research is about people's needs. Now, we had an ingoing hypothesis that people had some form of mental accounting when it came to finances for later life. They'd have a bucket for their income, and that would be their main part, and some money for care if they were aware that they weren't going to get care from the state for whatever reason. If there's anything over, how they'll fund the kids. If they haven't got good state health care, what they'll do to provide that. But this isn't really something we found much evidence for. What we found instead is that people don't really separate the physical and financial a lot. First thing I should say about this slide actually is please ignore the fact, which was my first reaction, that these are clearly not people from the same household and they're not social distancing. It's very difficult, I don't know if anyone else has found it, to watch a presentation or a TV program or anything saying, oh, they're a bit close, they should perhaps stand 2 meters apart. But that could just be me, and a bit of my obsessive nature, as you saw with my approach to financial planning earlier. But the focus, I want you to focus here on the quotes and the idea that many people see wealth and health as interchangeable. On the right hand side, this quote, which we've paraphrased from so many markets because it was just the same thing, and we just wanted to get it into a succinct quote, which: health starts with keeping fit and eating well. Money's important, but if you haven't got your health, then it doesn't really matter, essentially. And this quote from Korea, which again is just representative of many markets: it is important to create sufficient funds in case your health deteriorates. Medical bills are so expensive. So it's this interlocking thinking around health and finances, and the way the two just can't be separated. And then, of course, from China, we can see the connections between it all and the knock-on effects. A bad health condition would lead to funding and dependence on others for care, which in the end leads to a lower life quality. So whilst we thought consumers might have a hierarchy starting with the life quality, then we'll start to look after our health, then we'll start to look after our care, and then if there's anything over, we'll look after the sort of bequeath aspects of passing wealth onto the next generation. If that can be afforded. We didn't see that really. We saw these things just being all bundled together and not really being separated in this whole more of a package. Now obviously there were people who thought differently, but that's the sort of thing. So we can see that by understanding consumer needs, we could perhaps do more. So how can the insurance industry increase its share of wallet as society's share declines? Historically, the insurance industry has looked at everything through the prism of risks, especially catastrophic risks. Now, what do I mean about this? What do I mean by this? Well, on the left-hand side, for example, consumers historically have focused on this idea of protecting yourself from the risk of being unable to pay for institutional care. Now, that's the idea that if you ever need to go into a nursing home, that there's a big expense, and it's true, there are huge expenses with that, associated with that. But these products haven't sold as well as the industry had perhaps hoped, and they've had repeated attempts to try to sell them. But as we've already heard, the consumer doesn't identify with this problem at all. Much more people tell us, don't let me go into a nursing home, don't let me go into a care home, keep me independent and healthy for as long as possible. So forward-thinking insurers are starting to listen more and more to consumer needs. So if we start to look at problems that consumers need solving and start to focus on these problems, as countries and citizens adapt, the insurance industry could do much more to help people solve their problems and help pay for aging. And indeed, there's a need also for service provision tied with this. Consumers see great value in services and not just the financial side of things that insurance can offer. And there's potential for partnerships that can exist. So in conclusion, the aging population is not a single homogenous group, and the way we pay for aging is evolving. There are differences between and within generations, but by understanding them better, we can create more relevant solutions to serve them better. So I just want to take the time now to say thank you for taking the time to listen to this. And also, if you've got any questions, it would be great to engage with some of you. There are facilities through the conference to talk to people. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you've got. Unfortunately, we haven't had the time. We haven't got the facilities in this new world that we're living in currently. We haven't got the time to discuss things directly, but hopefully we can have some via some of the chat facilities which exist. Thanks again for listening, and please stay safe, stay well, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.